So good evening. I'm Graham Allison, the director of the Belfer Center for Science and International Affairs, and it's my great pleasure to welcome you here tonight and to welcome our special guests, two legendary intelligence professionals, Tamir Pardo, who's just recently retired as the head of Mossad, and Michael Morell, who was deputy director and acting director of CIA. So let's say welcome to them. And let me thank our colleague Tom Kaplan, who helped facilitate Tamir's visit here. The secret was that Tamir had actually never come to New England ever before. This is his first visit to Boston, and so I'm not sure he would have submitted to this activity had he not had an opportunity to come to Boston for the week. But in any case, we're especially honored that he came. So each of these individuals have spent a career of more than 3 decades in his own National Intelligence Service and risen to the highest levels. Most of the audience will be somewhat familiar with CIA, and Mossad is essentially Israel's counterpart. The primary mission of both Mossad and CIA is to gather intelligence from all sources and to analyze it, to analyze the data, to provide their political masters understanding about the challenges that are faced and the choices and the likely consequences. So when the President of the United States or the Prime Minister of Israel is wondering what's happening and even what's likely to happen, the person he's most likely to call is the head of Mossad or the head of CIA. Fortunately for us, not necessarily for the countries involved, but fortunately for us, these two gentlemen are now retired. And so we can have the good fortune of asking the kind of questions, maybe even ones that a president or prime minister would have asked, and listening to their answers. So this is an extraordinary opportunity for all of us, and we really thank you for coming, and thanks for the two together. As we were teasing before, just as we came out, I said, I guess, Michael, you never imagined you could work for Mossad, or Tamir, that you would work for CIA. They said, look, we worked together so closely for so many years, sometimes we didn't know which side we were working with or for. So in any case, these are two gentlemen that have worked together long before tonight. Let me start you off with a question about ISIL, which is what we advertised. Last week in the Senate, John McCain asked our colleague Ash Carter, the Secretary of Defense, are we winning? Well, this is about ISIL. Are we winning? So again, not if you were giving a political answer, but analytically, what's your answer? Michael, what would you say?
So I'd say, first of all, Graham, thank you for the invitation. It's great to be here, as always, and I'm truly honored to be on the stage with a very, very good friend of mine, Tamir Pardo. If the President of the United States asked me that question, I would tell him that we're both winning and losing. In fact, there's a very interesting dichotomy, I think, going on between what's happening to ISIL in Iraq and Syria, which is they're being squeezed. They're being squeezed by a reduction in territory. We've taken 40% of it away. They're being squeezed with regard to their finances. They're being squeezed with regard to their leadership. They're having leadership removed from the battlefield. So in that sense, right, they're losing. But in another sense, they're winning. And the winning sense is they have put together an attack capability in Western Europe that is really hard to overstate. There have been 12 ISIS attacks in Europe since ISIS declared its caliphate. Half of those have occurred and that's a 2-year period. Half of those have occurred in the last 6 months. So the pace of attacks is quickening. This is a very sophisticated attack capability, clandestine movement of money, weapons, bomb makers, bomb-making facilities, use of throwaway phones, use of encryption, and it's very sophisticated. It poses a direct threat to us. And then the other way that they're winning is that their ideology, right? Their ideology has spread significantly outside of Iraq and Syria to now 25 different countries, 30-some different militant groups in 25 different countries say they're now part of ISIS. So in both of those senses, they're winning. So at the moment, it's really both, Graham.
Tamir, how would you assess it from Israel?
First of all, as Mike said, thank you very much. It's an honor to be here. And it's an honor to be sitting beside you and my good friend Mike as we work together for such a long time. No, we are not winning for the moment, unfortunately. I think that we're dealing with ISIS, ISIL, we're dealing with socio-economical phenomena. People lost their jobs, people didn't have enough money to buy food for their kids. The middle class disappeared at a certain stage. It started over 10 years ago. In our region, people will not become communist, but either go to the church, to the mosque, or to the synagogue. In that case, as the majority are Muslims, they went to the mosque. Mosque offered them different things that their governments, their administration couldn't deliver. When we saw the situation now, from my point of view, we are in some kind of, I'm going to call it a third world war. It's a different kind. You cannot compare the First World War with the Second World War, and the Third World War is totally different from the second one. When Mike mentioned 33 countries, I can say that it's much more than 50 or 60, because you can find those extremists almost everywhere when you have even a small Sunni minority. You can see those people fighting in 33 or 35 states today, but the roots are in many other places as well. To beat or to compete with those people, you need a political decision. You can use the armed forces, the security agencies, whatsoever, as assisting to achieve the goal. But at the end of the day, it's a political decision to bring food, proper education, Medicare to those people. Without that, you won't be able to win and to isolate those extremist people.
Can I just say, jump in and say that I think we answered two different questions. I answered a question about ISIS, the individual group, right? I think Tamir answered a question about Islamic extremism in general. And if you ask me that question, are we winning that war? Absolutely not. No, we're losing.
So we agree.
So we agree. That's what I'm saying. Right? I see Al Qaeda as Islamic extremism 1.0. I see ISIS as Islamic extremism 2.0. And if we don't deal with all the things that Tamir just talked about, then even if we defeat ISIS, the group, you're going to see some other group 3.0.
But Michael, to pick that one up, so for Islamic extremism 1.0, you were the head of the U.S. effort to deal with Al Qaeda and Osama bin Laden. That was your main charge. So how did we do in that one? Pretty good?
So in containing the core group, right, in Pakistan, Afghanistan, we did exceptionally well. In doing something about the ideology, we failed. There's really two parts to this war, right? One part is stopping the people who are already terrorists who are trying to kill you. And the other part of it is stopping the creation of terrorists in the first place. Right? My job happened to be stopping the terrorists who are already created from trying to kill us. I didn't see anybody else in our government or anybody else in other parts of the world, quite frankly, who were trying to get their arms around that second problem. How do you stop the creation of terrorists in the first place?
So let's stay with that one for a second, Tamir. So if that's the case, the question many people ask is, how long is this going to go on? If we take the not just Al-Qaeda or ISIL, but Islamic jihadism, I mean, is this a forever war?
Unless we'll take the right decision. I'll give you something as a sample, right? Let's assume that tomorrow morning all the fractions in Syria, and there are many, will agree on a ceasefire for 30 days. On top of it, let's assume that even Mr. Bashar Assad and his entourage will be ready to leave Syria and to go to Moscow or to the Bahamas. What's going to happen on the at the end of those 30 days, the 31st day? The war. It will continue without Bashar. Why? Because in order to bring Syria to the poor situation that Syria was in it 5 years ago, you need $200-300 billion to recover Syria. Who's going to invest in Syria? The United States? Not even $1. The Russians? Not even a ruble. The Chinese? No way. The European? No way. So the situation will remain as it was. So the extremists that will be today ISIS or ISIL, tomorrow Jabhat al-Nusra or Harasham or Al-Qaeda or any other of 1,000 fractions that are fighting each other and killing and eating each other, will remain there. They will continue to fight. So I don't see, unless we're going to invent something, we're going to be out of the box to solve the economic problems of the region. It's there, it's in Syria, it is in Iraq, it's in Egypt, in many, many other countries. I'm not talking about Libya or Yemen or Sudan or Somalia. It's there.
But so Tamir, though, I mean, here you're back in your old job. You're now in Israel. You're in the midst of this whole sea. And every dimension I look, I can see the problem you're facing. So if it's in Syria, if it's in Iraq, if it's in Jordan, if it's in Egypt, if it's in Libya, so I mean, nobody is going to come and fix the fundamental economics of these countries for a year, a decade, a century. I mean, how long is this?
It's going to turn much worse before someone will start to understand among the politicians in the free world and not only in the free world that if we want a change, we should change our attitude. It's not enough to eliminate those terrorists. It's not enough to do our job to prevent next attack in Tel Aviv or in New York or in Paris. We'll do it. I hope that we'll succeed as we did in the past, but it's not enough because even 1 out of 100 attacks that they are planning will take place, the outcome is horrible. Look at what happened in 9/11 here, look what happened in Paris or in London a decade ago. I don't think that our citizens will tolerate with it for a long time. And we can do our best, but it's not enough. Not enough.
So Michael, what do you think?
So if I was
is
gonna-
it forever? Yeah.
So the way I answer that question is I say I believe that my children's generation and my grandchildren's generation is still going to be fighting this fight. Um, I think there's three fundamental dynamics that are underway in the Middle East that have created this problem. And I don't think it's going to go away until we get our arms around all three of them. And the first one is the rise of Islamic extremism, which I define as a belief by a small number of Muslims that the West is a threat to their religion, that the belief on the part of some of them that the United States' intent is to destroy their religion, and a belief on some of their part that they're preparing for the end of the world here. That is a long-term dynamic with deep roots in Islam that the religion does not seem to want to get its arms around. I'm just very frank here. The second dynamic is the failure of governance in every state in the region except two, Israel and the United Arab Emirates. And it is what Tamir talked about, right? It's the failure to provide the view that your standard of living is going to get better. The failure to provide parents with the view that their kids are going to have a better life than them. And this is a failure of politics, it's a failure of economic policy, it's a failure of social policy, it's just across the board. And then the third dynamic is this struggle between the Sunni Gulf states and Iran. And it's often put that way, and I think that's actually the wrong way of putting it. I think the actual right way of putting it is Iran's pursuit of regional domination. I don't think that's too strong a word. And the Sunni Arab states push back against that. And these are the big three dynamics that are creating the Iraqs, the Syrias, the Yemens, the Libyas. And this problem, as Tamir said, is just not going to go away until you get your arms around all three of those.
Okay, so
I would like to add,
please.
I think one major problem is that for decades, we and everyone made a distinction between a good terrorist and bad terrorists. In the 80s, the Taliban were very good terrorists. They're supported by the United States. We had our, let's say, problems with Lebanon, that for quite a long time we supported those who became very bad terrorists, but we saw them as good terrorists because their intention were good during that time for our purposes there. And now the RGC, for some reasons, are good terrorists because now they are doing something, they are trying to fight ISIS. Yeah. But they were very bad terrorists yesterday, they are very bad terrorists for us today, they're going to be worse tomorrow. But things will change. And it's everywhere like that. And I think if the majority of the states, the important states at least, from the United States, Russia, China, European countries, other moderate countries, will take a proper decision, say there is no distinction. Every terrorist is a bad terrorist. Even if he's serving our purposes now and our strategic goal now, they are bad because tomorrow morning they're going to turn against us. And it is an illusion to think that a terrorist can be good. He will always be bad. And unless we'll come to some kind of an agreement that we cannot support terrorism whatsoever, and the one who will support it should be expelled, I think that might lead to something good in the future.
So let me step back just another step and look at the region, which from an American perspective looks like it's pretty unsettled or even burning, as it's often the press would say. So in 2003, the U.S. decided to topple Saddam. We invaded Iraq, toppled Saddam, occupied it. In 2011, President Obama decided to join Britain and France in toppling Gaddafi. And now we have Libya. Today, every day, we have airstrikes being conducted in Syria and Iraq and a number of the other regions, a number of other countries, special forces operations. So looking at this, presidential candidate Trump said the following, quote, "If you go back 15 years, I say this. If our presidents would have just gone to the beach and enjoyed the ocean and the sun, we would be much better off in the Middle East." Close quote. So, does Trump have a point?
Let me
Yeah,
go
come
first.
on. Hey, it's not unfair. I think that generally, many politicians, if to go to the beach, many good things will occur.
So you prescribed the beach, yes? Okay. But Michael, I mean, you presumably advised on these occasions, and I don't think the beach was on your options list. You were just doing estimates, not policy options, but still, if somebody had said, the other option, Mr. President, is go to the beach. Yeah?
Yeah, so look, I think a couple things, and I've thought a lot about this. One is, I believe that the mistake in Iraq was not so much the removal of Saddam. I believe the mistake in Iraq was the de-Baathification decisions that destroyed the Iraqi military, destroyed the Iraqi security services, destroyed the Iraqi intelligence service. Created a vacuum that was filled by al-Qaeda and filled by the insurgents. I also think it's very difficult, second point, I think it's very difficult to know with any certainty whatsoever what history would have looked like under a different set of policies. I think it's become conventional wisdom that somehow we would be much better off today in the Middle East if the U.S. had not invaded Iraq on both sides of the aisle. It's conventional wisdom now. I can actually paint you a scenario in which we'd be worse off. And that scenario is not that difficult to think that it actually could have happened. Saddam's plan was to get out from underneath sanctions and to restart his WMD programs. That was his plan, including his nuclear weapons program. And he would have eventually, in my scenario that I'm now laying out for you, he would have eventually come out from under those sanctions and he would have pursued those programs. So it's not impossible to believe that Iraq, to the great detriment of the region and the great detriment to Israel, would have developed those weapons. And then you add on top of that scenario the Arab Spring, and think about the Arab Spring coming to Iraq and overthrowing Saddam. Remember, the Arab Spring, with the exception of Lebanon, the Arab Spring has overthrown every secular leader in the region. And so you could have a Libya-style, Syria-style situation in Iraq with weapons of mass destruction in different people's hands. So I can think of a worse scenario.
We know how to start wars. We have no idea how to end them. By the way, we may be brilliant even, the way we are starting it, and the way our forces are moving in and taking over as you did in 2003. But what next? I don't know if Saddam was still in power, what could have happened. But I must tell you that when you are starting a war, you are actually changing an equilibrium. Before 2003, there was an equilibrium between Iraq and Iran. This kind of equilibrium gave some let's say, I want to say tranquility in the Middle East, but at least some safety and security to the Gulf countries, for instance, because they were rival for a very long time. Saddam has his own plans, and I'm not judging if it was right or wrong. I think that toppling Saddam, if the consequences were different than what we had, could be a brilliant move. But in order to create something different, you should invest a lot. The moment that, and the invasion and the war was really the greatest success, I think, in a conventional war that I can remember. It was perfectly planned, and the results were really phenomenal. But the day after, we are dealing with a state that the borders were assigned in Paris and London after the First World War, with different ethnic problems, with the Shia that were the majority, oppressed by a Sunni minority for a very long time. The Shia with their relation with Iran on one hand. They were sitting on all the oil and gas in Iraq. The Kurds with their own problem, looking for independence without any support for no one for that independence. And the Sunnis that were the actual rulers, but if you are judging them, they have only sand. The moment that that war was over and no armed forces, no real administration, nothing really existed anymore, we start to see something that is collapsing the statehood of Iraq. And that's the outcome that brought at the end of the day this ISIS and other fractions.
And I think sadly, I remember when Sharon came to Washington in 2002, that's exactly what he was saying. So it was like a predictable outcome that if one toppled a Sunni Ba'athist repressive regime and let the country be ruled by the majority Shiite, they would end up aligned with Iran and the Kurds would be left out, and that this would be the predictable consequence. So that was the argument. Let me take you back to, as long as we're doing Iran, the Iran nuclear deal, which we've debated here many occasions, as you can imagine.
Well,
So,
too many.
Probably too many, but I'd be interested in your own views at this point. So I'm a big fan of the new, or recently, he's not new, he's been there for a year, Chief of the General Staff in Israel, General Eisenkot. And here's what he says. He says, quote, "Without a doubt, the nuclear deal between Iran and the West is a historic turning point. It's a big change in terms of the direction that Iran was headed, and also in the way we saw things. We're still keeping Iran high on our priority list because we need to monitor its nuclear program, but no doubt about it, this is a strategic turning point," close quote. So agree or disagree, and why?
He said so, and he's a very good friend of mine, so I accept.
Michael, what do you say at this point?
Yeah, I don't think it's a strategic turning point. Look, I actually like the deal. All by itself, in its little nuclear package, I like the deal. In my mind, there's two key parts to it. One is takes what was a 2-month breakout period and would have been just a handful of weeks, 3-4 weeks, had they continued, to well over a year for 10 to 15 years. I think that's not a bad thing. The second piece of it is the part that I worried the most about was not the not the declared facilities. I worried about a covert facility, and the second part of it is the deal makes it much more difficult for them to sneak out, as we used to call it, sneak out using a covert facility. So I think the nuclear deal is a good thing. From a nuclear, only a nuclear perspective, kind of the worst thing you can happen is 10 to 15 years from now, you're back where you are. It's the other part of Iran policy that I'm concerned about. It's not only the nuclear issue that we have a problem with the Iranians. We have a whole bunch of issues with the Iranians. We have their desire for regional hegemony. We have their support for terrorists, Hezbollah, for example. We have their support for regional insurgents. We have the fact that it's Iranian state policy to wipe Israel off the face of the planet. There's a lot of things about Iran that we do not like. Iran, I think it's fair to say, is the only country in the world that still practices terrorism as a tool of statecraft. So we have a lot of problems with the Iranians. So it's really the second half where I'd like to see more action, right? At the same time we cut the nuclear deal, I would like to see the United States and its partners put intense pressure on the Iranians for all of that malign behavior that I just talked about. Right? I'd like to see us use the sanctions we use so effectively to get them to the nuclear negotiating table to put pressure on them with regard to all this other bad behavior. President gave a speech, right before the nuclear deal was signed, in which he talked about, we used to make arms control agreements all the time with the Soviet Union. And we did, absolutely we did. That was only half the story, right? We made arms control agreements that made sense to us. At the same time, we were pushing back against Soviet malign behavior everywhere it was happening in the world. And we're not doing that with Iranian malign behavior.
Will the Iranian start again their nuclear project? I hope they won't start in the coming years because of the agreement, because it serves them. But I'm not sure that they will not try to do something stupid in the coming years. And as we are living in as I said, we are in the middle of some kind of third world war. There are some circumstances that we may find ourselves that Iran will make their move not tomorrow, but in quite a short time, because they're gonna feel that they are safe enough that they can make the move without being punished. And that's what I worry about. The second issue is exactly what Mike said. I think that the mishap or the mistake that was done on that deal was to whitening Iran to continue to play a major role in using terrorism in order to achieve their goals. Think what happened in Yemen. They did it during the last days of the negotiation, supporting the Houthis. See what's happening even in these days, or what happened with the Hezbollah during the time that the negotiations still took place. And now they feel that they are on the right side. According to the news just 3-4 days ago, what happened in the Green Zone in Baghdad with Mr. Sadr, okay, is playing to the hands of Iran. And to understand that if the Iranian will control, but 100% control, all the resources, the gas and oil resources that are in Iraq, we're dealing with a monster at the end of the day that hold the majority of the resources of oil and gas of all the world. And no one is saying anything about it. And that's the point. And that's the reason I'm saying that why no one trying to oppose them, because we have a war against ISIS. So at a certain point, they can think that they can make a move on the nuclear project, because people are going to say, okay, we won't have any chance but to agree, because there are other challenges or other threats, and that's the reason that we'll tolerate with it, and that's exactly what Iran needs in order to make their move.
So let me take you even another step back and look at Israel's situation in the region today. So we had recently a visitor here, whom you know, Amos Gilead, who's the director of political military affairs for the Israeli Ministry of Defense. So here's what Amos said. He says, 5 years after the Arab Spring, the American headlines are Middle East on fire. But Israelis believe our security situation has substantially improved. And here he says, our security situation hasn't been so good for a long time. The quiet is pretty amazing compared to all the turbulence around us. Now, Amos is given to being provocative, but what do you say to that?
There is no connection between the Palestinian problem and the ISIS and the extremism in general. Okay, and thinking to combine the two things, say, okay, because of the Palestinian issue, we see ISIS, we see the case, what's happening in Iraq or in Syria or in Libya. That's wrong. It's not right. I think that we're in a better shape than others in the Middle East, but I think that there are yellow or red lights that are blinking and flashing, and we should worry about, because in that case, when we're dealing with extremism, I'm not afraid of Al-Qaeda, Jabhat al-Nusra, or ISIS invasion to Israel. Okay, they will never be able to do it. They will never be able to achieve anything with it. But those movements are a threat from inside. And my worry is, even though I saw a poll, let's say over a year ago, that there are only few percentages supporting ISIS and ISIL in the West Bank and Gaza, the numbers may rise up. And if we have to deal with such a phenomena in the West Bank and Gaza, it might be a totally different story. But I'm not sure that I like it.
So, Mike, what would you say? Is Israel should feel more secure than it did 5 years ago?
No. A lot of red lights flashing, absolutely.
Okay. So let me take you to one more question, sticking in Israel for a second. So, Tamir, you've said at a separate occasion, you were asked the question, and this is a Haaretz report in any case, so maybe this is not correct, but in any case. So the paper said, you were asked the question, what is the single biggest threat to Israel? And you answered, the single biggest threat to Israel is the Palestinian issue.
Yes, I do.
So is that correct? And if so,
First of all, I
explain.
said it.
You said it? Okay, good. So the Haaretz reporter will be happy. Yes, good.
I think that it's a political question, and I'm trying to avoid entering to those issues, as I left my position as a director of the Mossad only 4 months ago. So I don't want to enter into that question, but I can elaborate 2 sentences.
On the issue, yeah.
I think that the declaration of our Prime Minister years ago that we need to move towards a two-state solution, it's right. I worry that as time is passing, this opportunity is, well,
Shrinking.
maybe shrink, maybe not valid anymore. And I think that if that will happen, at a certain stage, we might see that our cousins, the Palestinians, will say, well, it's better one state for Palestinians and Israeli and Jewish between the sea and the Jordan River. And for me, as a second generation from the Holocaust, that is not acceptable. And I worry that as time is passing, we are approaching the PNR, or point of no return, that might be the only solution. And for me, it's unacceptable. That's the reason that I say that time is running very fast, and the proper decision should be taken.
So, Michael, if you were asked by the president what the single biggest threat to Israel,
Yeah, I would probably agree. I don't believe Israel can achieve the security, the long-term security it needs to achieve without a two-state solution. The Palestinians saying, all right, let's just be one state here, is a nightmare scenario. Either because it could become violent, or much more likely because they simply say, okay, we're all part of one country here, we want the right to vote. And I do worry that time has passed. You know, some of the offers that were once put on the table and rejected by the Palestinians are no longer possible from Israel, I don't believe. It's also interesting to look at the rest of the region, who was once focused like a laser on this problem and now have completely, you know, I can't tell you how many times I went to Sunni Gulf states, and that was the first talking point, Palestinians. And now, toward the end of my time, it wasn't even on the list anymore.
it's interesting. So we're going to turn to questions from the audience. There are 2 microphones here on the ground floor, and there are 2 more microphones on the loge. And the rule is line up. We'll recognize you. Short questions in with a question mark. And please introduce yourself to start with. Let's start with this gentleman, please.
Hello, can I be heard? Thank you. My name is Ian Brinkley, and I'm a volunteer with the LaRouche Political Action Committee. Thank you for the opportunity. In January of 2001, 8 months before 9/11 occurred, Lyndon LaRouche had issued a warning that within the first year of the Bush administration, the United States would undergo a terrorist attack, which would be used as an excuse by the administration to seize executive power unconstitutionally. Recently, former Senator Bob Graham has come out and indicated that if the FBI and the Bush and Obama administrations had not covered up for the role of Saudi Arabia in 9/11 by withholding the 28 pages, then ISIS wouldn't exist today. So my question is, given the pressures that are building around the Middle East region, especially between the United States and Russia, and the potential of thermonuclear war emanating out of that, would both of you respectfully add your name to the list of figures around the world who are calling for a release of the 28 pages and a full disclosure of Saudi Arabia's role in 9/11? Thank you.
So I'll start. Thanks for the question. I'm 100% fine with the 28 pages being declassified. I think you are going to be extremely disappointed.
Being declassified.
Declassified. I think you're going to be extremely disappointed when you see the contents. I think the 9/11 Commission, which had access to the 28 pages, which actually investigated what was in the 28 pages, came to the conclusion that there was no role by the Saudi government or Saudi government officials acting on their own. So absolutely, let's get it out there and let's get this over with, and let's get to the truth.
Okay. Tamir, do you want to come in? Or it's not your problem. This is the lady in the loge.
I had
please.
enough of mine.
You have enough problems. Yes, good.
Hi, my name is Madison Gonzalez. I'm a sophomore at the college and a member of the John F. Kennedy Jr. Forum. So, ISIS has launched a mass media campaign that demonstrates high levels of quality and production, an estimated 90,000 supporting Twitter accounts in several major media centers. Given that a large amount of their influence and recruiting is done through a high level of mastery of these digital platforms that are highly accessible, to what extent can the US and Israeli forces mitigate the spread of ISIS?
So I'd make 2 points. One is you're absolutely right about their capability. It is world class. It's Madison Avenue style quality. I actually watched one of their videos a few weeks ago, and I found it compelling. And I've fought these guys for years, and I found it compelling. They were very, very good. You know, dealing with it, you really have a couple different choices, right? One is to take on the narrative. It's really, really hard for a Western non-Muslim country to do because the message is wrapped in a religious message. And we don't have any credibility, right? The United States of America doesn't have any credibility taking on that narrative. Right? We're not a Muslim country. The other way to try to deal with it is to deal with it through cyber means. And I've been reading in the paper that the U.S. is quite active in trying to do that. I will tell you that it's very, very, very hard to do. And the reason it's hard to do is because if they're over on this server producing that content and you knock out that server, tomorrow they can do it again on this server, right? So it's very, very, very difficult to keep them offline for very long. So this is a very, very tough problem. It's not an easy answer, or we would have found it a long time ago.
That's the new war. Those are the new weapons. So we must find the counter weapons in order to use it in a proper way. What we must remember, they are using our infrastructure in order to use their own weapons. So what should we do? Are we going to use it in a way that will look at your phone and try to find out what you are saying, what you are writing? We have to preserve, I think, our democracy and be ready even to pay quite a higher price for that. I think it's better to suffer from their, let's say, behavior than to ruin our own society and the things that we believe in. It's quite easy to pass a rule here and there that will force, let's say, our industry to give everything to our security services. It may serve us for a very short period of time. Then it's going to hurt us all. I'm not saying it because I retired. I thought the same thing when I served as a director.
Thank you.
So let me just ask you to do one more brief comment on this, because and I like very much Damir's notion that this is some new war and that we don't really understand the dimensions of it yet, and we don't understand, even as we were talking yesterday, what is Islamic extremism, how is it being so infectious. But the notion that a few guys create a narrative that's better than what the US or Israel could help somebody else create, and then, even more incredible to me, that they can manage to use the web better than the folks who invented the web, Madison Avenue, whatever. There's something puzzling about this.
We should be better, come on.
Yes.
So they're not only using our own infrastructure, they're using our own people, right? These aren't, the people doing this for ISIS aren't kids who grew up in Anbar province. These aren't kids who grew up in Raqqa or Mosul. These are kids who grew up in Paris or Brussels or London or Minneapolis, right? Those are the folks who are doing this Madison Avenue style quality stuff.
Okay, it doesn't figure for me, but this gentleman, yes.
Balson, I'm a freshman at the college. My question is about Saudi Arabia. It's obviously a key player in the Middle East, and with the Yemeni bombing campaign, the recent sale of a 5% stake in Saudi Aramco, and some track 2 discussions between Saudi and Israeli academics in New York, there's been more change going on in that country potentially than we've seen in a long time. So within the next 10 years, what developments do you see coming out of that country, and are they going to be positive or negative for the U.S. and for Israel?
I hope that the relationship between Saudi Arabia and Israel and the Emirates and the other Gulf country will improve. Whether we're going to see an Israeli embassy in Saudi Arabia or in the Gulf countries before solving the Palestinian problem, no way, unfortunately. We may see improvement in the relationship. We have the same strategic goal in many issues, but in order to break those walls, we need to solve the Palestinian problem. Otherwise, okay, they're going to be a strategic relation, let's say, below the radar, but not formal, unfortunately.
I would just add my hope, which is that Mohammed bin Salman, the Deputy Crown Prince, the son of the king, 30 years old, he has outlined a number of very significant reforms. They are all reforms that are necessary for the continued success of the kingdom. I am very hopeful that he successfully implements those and that they're accepted in the kingdom because they're needed badly.
So I would just make as a good footnote, I would say clearly the young Deputy Crown Prince is the most ambitious and has the idea that there are huge problems. But if you read carefully his announcements of what's going to happen, in 2020, Saudi will no longer be dependent on oil. Hello? I mean, who can believe that? Saudi is about to become a great tourist destination. I think a tourist destination where you can't get a drink, I'd say, think about that. So I think there's a big disconnect between the ambitions and the plans that have been announced. This lady.
Hi, thank you for coming. My name is Wei Wei. I'm an MPP1 student here at Kennedy School, and I come from China. I read a lot. My question goes to Mr. Pardo, and I read a lot of stories about your agents in Mossad. I heard they can get to know my password to my credit card within 5 minutes. What do my parents do? But my question is not about this, but it'd be interesting if you answer this. My question is about assassinations. Along the history in Mossad, there are a lot of successful assassinations happened, and I want to know your opinion about assassinations, and will assassinations bring peace and security to your country? Thanks.
Well, it's a tough question, I must admit. I don't think that assassination can solve problems. Okay? We never admitted that we assassinate anyone. And I think that, but being honest, okay, doing bad things, it's a part of a game or part of life. It started, well, 1,000 years ago. Okay? There were things that were done by Roman and Greeks in the past, and the results were great, and there were actions were taken that the results were awful. From time to time, you have to use your power, and every country, every state is doing it, including, I guess, United States of America, I guess China as well, in order to preserve their strategic interest when the threat needed to be taken care of in such a way. Do I like it? No, I don't like it. But when it's necessary to do it and there is no other way to do it, it should be done. Unfortunately, that's the only answer I can get you.
That's a very candid answer. Michael, do you want to say anything about this?
Yeah, I think I'd say two things. One is, the United States of America uses drones to kill terrorists. It's not an assassination. An assassination is it has a particular legal definition. It's not an assassination. So that's point number one. I think the second point would be, for all of you who have qualms over that kind of thing, I would just ask you if a gang member was trying to break into your home and kill your family, and if you had a weapon, would you use it? That's exactly the situation that the leadership of our country, both countries face.
Okay, well, this could be another topic for another evening, but we're going to
I'm
this
sure it
lady
can, yeah.
on the Bloge. I'm sorry,
Hi.
on the floor.
Rachel Brinkley, I'm with LaRouche PAC. I am concerned right now about the threat of nuclear war, looking at the military buildup around China, around Russia, and the call to arm the rebels in Syria when the planes in Syria are Syrian and Russian. And that would be US weapons shooting down Russian planes. I'm concerned about that. In light of that, we just had John Brennan recently discussed the 28 pages, and he said, quote, "This chapter was kept out because of concerns about sensitive source of methods investigative actions." This chapter was kept out because of concerns about this. Well, the person who wrote that chapter, Dana Lesseman, was fired by the 9/11 Commission for trying to pursue those 28 pages and follow up on the information which is found in them. And this is also out there in a 47-page document recently released by ICECAP, which includes much surrounding material around the 28 pages. So I think we should look at those. But the issue is not simply Saudi Arabia, but Prince Bandar and the British. And my question is if this is known and President Obama has refused and allowed these to be covered up, should he not be removed for treason?
So I think we answered the 28-page question already, right? Which is let's get the 28 pages out there, and I think that a lot of the conspiracy theories around the 28 pages are going to go away when those pages are released. And my understanding, based on what the President of the United States has said publicly, is that the Director of National Intelligence is working to declassify those 28 pages.
He's lying.
So your bet, but there's a bet on the table, and the bet by Michael is that we'll see the 28 pages declassified
Yes, I
in
think
the
so.
near future.
I
Well,
think so.
we'll look and see. This gentleman,
You
please.
can hold me to that, but I think you will.
This gentleman.
Yep. Hi, my name is Ben Bolger, and I'm a Harvard alumnus. In Europe, the Marshall Plan contributed to a lasting peace because of addressing some economic inequalities. Part of the discussion today was that radicalism and extremism that produces violence and terrorism in the Middle East may be related to extreme economic inequalities. Would a modernized Marshall Plan that focuses on economic inequalities in the Middle East help to address some of the extremism that I think we're all concerned about.
In the European context, when you're absolutely right, the saying 12 points. Yes, that's the answer, from my point of view.
Agreed. Agreed.
Okay, this
Thank
gentleman.
I guess the question though is, where does the money come from?
Right.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, Tamir just talked about just what Syria needs to rebuild, not alone what it should have had before the civil war ever started, right? You're talking about one country. So where does the money come from?
There is money, it should be found and put on the table in order to do it. Otherwise, the price is going to be very, very high.
Okay, this is a big idea. Please.
Alfredo Romero, I'm a fellow at the Carr Center for Human Rights Policy. It's a question for both of you, very specific one. Is there any real evidence of support from countries, or specifically from Venezuela, for terrorist groups, or specifically ISIL, that you know?
I have no idea. Sorry.
I don't know. I don't either.
Okay, this is.
I'm not letting Venezuela off the hook here, right? I think the Venezuelan regime has destroyed the country. I think the Venezuelan regime is trafficking in narcotics. I think there's a lot of bad things the Venezuelan regime has done, but I don't know of any evidence that they're supporting ISIS.
Okay, good for short questions and short answers. This gentleman.
Hello, Guy from the Executive Intelligence Review. Back to nuclear and world wars. The past week or so, the President of the United States has been going across Europe trying to drum up support to attack Russia, which is completely nuts because everyone knows their nuclear power, and it could easily turn into nuclear World War III. And on ISIL and Al-Qaeda and those groups, about 3 weeks to a month ago, the United States gave weapons to Al-Qaeda in Aleppo, and many times gave funds and arms to ISIS in Syria, which is both treason, and the Provost Marshal should remove the president. Your comments?
I don't think, I haven't seen any factual basis to support what you just said, so I don't get myself to treason. I just don't.
Well,
So.
the president himself said he's looking to take out the Assad regime in Syria no matter what it takes, and definitely send arms over there. They're going to the arms of ISIS.
I don't think there's any evidence that any weapons the U.S. might be sending into Syria, right? I don't think there's any evidence that they're going to ISIS.
Okay, this gentleman.
Coming. My name is Karim, and I'm majoring in finance. I go to Northeastern. I have a question. I'm from Tunisia, where the Arab Spring first started. And as you know, thousands of young Tunisians flew to Syria to join ISIL through Turkey. So my people think that Qatar and Turkey are highly involved in financing and making it easy to those terrorists to invade Syria. What do you think about that?
So it's a little known fact, but in terms of percentage
I would like to know.
No, it's a good question. In terms of percentage of people who've gone from Arab countries to join ISIL, I think Tunisia has the highest percentage.
Exactly.
So it's a very good question. Please.
We saw, since, let's say, during the last 3-4 years, thousands and thousands of young people that choose to enter or to participate in those fights and war, whether it was in Syria or in Iraq, and in many other places in Africa as well, by the way. They're coming from all over the world. They're coming from Europe, they come from South America, they come from
100 countries.
100 countries. So it's not Tunisia alone. So I don't understand, okay, I don't have any proof of what if the Qataris or others are paying or doing something in order to encourage.
At least Turkey make it easy for them to cross the border to
That's-
Syria.
It's a different.
They are using Turkey as a port of entry. Those are the facts. Whether it can be, those are facts, okay? Well, they're entering Syria through Turkey, and the Turks knows it. You know it, and we know it. It's an open. So what's the other countries, whether they're involved or not, I have no idea. Whether the Turkish authorities have proofs on that, I'm not having any, let's say, I'm not no more a director of intelligence service, so I have no idea.
Thank
What-
you.
What's your one question per customer. What's your impression, Michael?
So I would say I don't have any evidence of Turkey or Qatar financing, foreign fighters to come to Iraq and Syria. I don't have any evidence of that. I would say that for a long time, the Turks, in my view, did not enforce their border to the extent that they could have. And it was a calculated choice they made because they were more interested in toppling Assad than they were in preventing the rise of ISIS. I think they've done a better job recently. But even a perfect job on the part of Turkey in controlling that border would still mean that thousands of people could cross that border every day because it is a long border and challenging to defend.
So please, the lady in the loge. Yep.
My name is Cansu Çalınbay. I am a Turkish journalist from Istanbul, and I'm a Nieman Fellow this year at Harvard. So I think my question is a perfect follow-up to my Tunisian colleagues. I wonder what you make of the ISIS network inside Turkish territories and the nature of their attacks inside Turkey, given the fact that they kind of only attacked the Germans, the Israelis, and the Kurds. And also, Mr. Morel, you said the Turkish government's initial unwillingness to fight the moderate Islamists in their world. How did this play out for the ISIS growing into a bigger war machine?
So I'll answer the second part. 40,000 foreigners, non-Iraqi, non-Syrians, have gone to Iraq and Syria to fight, the vast, vast majority of them for ISIS, right? Some for al-Nusra, some for the moderate opposition, but the vast majority for ISIS. How many of those 40,000 would not have made it if the Turks had fully secured their border to the best of their ability? I'd say probably only 10% or 15% wouldn't have made it. So the number would still be very, very large.
As I said, when you start to distinguish between good terrorists and bad terrorists, at the very beginning, probably because of the policy, the Turkish policy, that many other countries, including this country here, said that Bashar should move away, should be toppled in that way or another. So they were part of the game. Okay, so they allowed anyone who was a good terrorist in their view, and it worked for a certain period of time. Time is moving on, and those good terrorists turn to be bad terrorists. That's exactly what they're doing now. Nothing has changed because Turkey changed their policy. And part of the Turkish policy was now against ISIS. So now ISIS can try to do things or to launch some attacks in Turkey itself. So that's exactly the ugliness or the bad things, that when you think today that you have a deal with a terrorist because he's serving your purposes, tomorrow he's going to try to kill you. That's exactly what happened in Turkey, as it's happened in many other places.
Okay, we're almost to the end. A quick question from here and from here, please.
My name's Ian Meyer. I'm a junior at the college. My question actually for Mr. Morell, on several occasions you've said that what keeps you up at night is the potential that domestic political divisions in the United States overwhelm our ability to effectively address terrorist threats from abroad. And so it's 2016, and I think these domestic political divisions are at the fore of everyone's mind. Are you more worried for the next 5-10 years than usual about this? And for Mr. Pardo, is this a concern you have with the Israeli domestic politics overwhelming your ability to keep people safe? And is there more concern than usual these days?
So let me just correct you a little bit, okay? So I always get asked the question, what keeps you up at night? When I was the deputy director of CIA, I had to put a national security, I had to give a national security answer, right? So what I said was a terrorist with nuclear weapons. And does that scare me? It absolutely scares the hell out of me, right? But the answer I now give, you're right, I give a different answer now. The answer I now give is the failure of our political system here in the United States to make the kind of decisions that we need to move our economy and our society forward. So not to stop terrorism, to move our own economy and our own society forward. And the reason that scares me so much is the most important determinant of a country's national security is the health of its economy and the health of its society, right? And that's why I now say it is the thing that worries me the most, the thing that keeps me up at night. And am I more worried about it in 2016 than I was in 2013 when I'm retired? How could I not be?
Fair enough.
Change the word United States with Israel, you got the same answer.
Okay, this lady gets the last question, please.
I'm Winnie Young. I'm an investment professional in Boston. And so my question is, so in the world of security and intelligence, information sharing and cross-border cooperation are keys to success, but this would not be possible without trust and partnership across countries. So how can intelligence agencies in the MENA region, a region that is has a lot of conflicts across political and religious lines, to develop trust and to coordinate the effort to defeat ISIS? What are some of the basic steps that they can take and improve on?
You're going to be surprised. The relationship between organizations like the CIA, Mossad, and others, even if the relationship between the states is not so good, remain very good because all of us, at the end of the day, have the same goal: to prevent attacks against our own citizens or to risk our own countries. So that brings agencies like ours for cooperation. So we have a great cooperation, in my view, and I hope in my colleague here. We have great cooperation with the United States and Israel for a very long time. United States and Israel together, and each of us alone, has great cooperation with other agencies all over the world in order to prevent those bad things. It worked very well in the past, and it's proving as time is passing because we have the same threats: ISIS, ISIL, others, Jabhat al-Nusra. And I think that as long as we have the same enemies, we'll be able to cooperate.
Okay, last word.
So I just say a couple things. One is the threats and challenges facing all of us are so significant that it is not possible for one nation's intelligence community, one nation's intelligence service to manage it all. The only way this works is through partnerships, the kind of partnerships that Tamir and I had, the kind of partnerships that the agency and Mossad have. So they're absolutely critical. A second point I'd make is that in order for there to be a partnership, there has to be capability in both services. If one service has no capabilities to collect intelligence, then there's no reason to partner, right? Unless you want to build up those capabilities so that they're actually able to do that. The third thing I'd say is you said the word trust, and that is the basis of the entire relationship. I trust him with my life. And without that trust, you can't have that partnership between intelligence services. And then the fourth thing I'd say, the last thing I'd say is for partnerships between intelligence services to work, they have to be bilateral. It's got to be country to country. Be really leery of proposals to create a European intelligence service, right? Or to have cooperation across 20-some European countries, right? Nobody's going to share in that kind of environment. People share country to country. They don't share in large, very large groups. There's no trust in large groups.
Okay, we could spend the whole evening here, and I think there would be questions to continue, but unfortunately, the witching hour says we've come to the, maybe not to conclusions on every topic, but in any case, to the end. So, with great thanks to these two great professionals, let's say thank you very much.